Thoughts on sculpture. Countless drops, myriad streams, join to make a river of dreams. Where on earth is the birthplace of a river that emerges without a trace? Looking for meaning, reaching the sound, soaking the vibes of a holy ground, going further into transcendence, the quest flows, silence. One day, everyone has to say for sure, mountains are bigger and rivers pure. There is the source, and I am a face, because I am in a tight embrace of all that's sacred, our beloved space. Dear friends, felt like sharing some thoughts on sculpture we had during our time in the mountains. Working on a series on asana sculptures, we are still exploring what kind of stone to work on, but more than that, what kind of space. As we moved around, maybe it was the effect of the rows and rows of tall peaks, the shapes, the geometry. We began to see the mountains as if a sculptor had gone about making them. We felt, did he do it in one night? Or did he take time? What were his thoughts? Would these mountains have been made if the earth was at rest, at peace with itself? They say the Himalayas were created when two tectonic plates collided. The Indian plate is said to have floated on the Indian Ocean, having separated millions of years ago from the Australian landmass, and collided with the Eurasian plate along Tibet violently. It is difficult to imagine that geological event sculpted such majestic shapes in stone and created such sublime, energetic, healing, meditative, and prayerful spaces. The mountains where the ancients nurtured many mystical sciences. These forms and spaces have been the ancient teacher of teachers. Looking at the mountains like this, the Himalayas seem to us to say, can you make sculpture like this? Can you create with stone an ascent to the heavens like the Kedar peak? Can the cascading flow of Bhagirathi, the impish laughter of Yamuna, be brought out in stone? What if we stepped into a time for thought itself, where in our minds there is no sense of proportion, no sense of what a measure is. Maya means to measure, and to measure is to make a thing by giving shape to it, to give it existence. In the ancient science of Vastu Shastra, Maya is the word for manifesting an idea. It means a division of the undivided principle. The Maya principle first creates the illusion of division and divides itself into parts And from this division, the diversity of creation is. Sitting by ourselves, looking at the mountains, the gaze gets lost in those jagged peaks and silken snows. There seems no gap between us and those peaks. The roar of river Mandakini too seems to somehow be standing still in time. There is this feeling being beyond all measure. Some voices are heard. We descend from the snowy heights like when we come out of a deep sleep into the waking state. And then we see the same hills as lines, planes, triangular shapes. We notice the ridges, the rock formations, the light and shadow, now in a process of reducing the infinite into a sum of finites. It is said that the mind gets created in this way every time we emerge from a trance or from deep sleep. Asana is spoken about in the Yoga Sutra as Ananta Samapratibhya, fixing the mind on the infinite. How do we capture that info? These mountains, the same rock on which I sit, seem to be calling to the infinite at the peaks where we were a moment back. A small child would draw the mountains in simple triangular forms. But in reality, a mountain is not a smooth triangle, but full of ups and downs. A big mountain has hundreds of smaller hills and cliffs. If you look at one such hill, the hill itself will have a jagged surface. The hill is composed of many mounds. If we take a small mound on a hill, the mound too is not a perfect pyramid. It will be composed of smaller pyramids and odd shapes. And this goes on to infinity. Finally, when we take a look at each small protrusion, that is, say 1 square millimeter in area, under the electron microscope, we would see that that tiny surface is itself a Himalayan landscape. Scientists say that when we go to the molecular level, the molecules are composed of atoms. The atoms have large spaces in between the subatomic particles. The subatomic particles themselves are composed of smaller particles. And then finally, matter is just vibrations of space. Matter too is just space. So what then is the true measure of a mountain? How large is the area of a mountain? The answer lies in why one asks the question. Because when we measure something, we do it according to a scale. And every scale has a minimum scale measure. If you measure something in kilometers, then the minimum scale measure is 1 kilometer. You can't register a measurement that is less than 1 kilometer. A distance that is 1256 meters will register as 1 kilometer. But if the minimum scale measure is in meters, the distance will measure as 1.256 kilometers. So the smaller the minimum scale is, the greater will be the area measured, the same area. So when we want to measure something, we have to set an appropriate minimum scale measure, depending on the level of accuracy we need. For example, when a satellite camera needs to register a human being, its accuracy needs to be far higher than when it needs to register a much larger truck. This is the principle of Maya at work. Our senses also function in the same way. When there is a thought process, when the mind is active, we see a version of reality, an approximation, the infinite, based on what we would like to see. We adjust the settings. Deep down, all measurements, all perspectives are an illusion. How does the sculptor, his chisel and hammer, go after that state of infinity before the world of measurement is born? If we stepped into a time before thought, before the illusion of the finite comes in, it's possible to see the entire universe as a field of creation, which began with the sculpting of space into time and matter, with tools such as fission, fusion, and gravity, making the whole of creation out of space, which is said to be the very material out of which creation has been fashioned. From the subtle idea to the concrete rock, everything is a piece of sculpted space. The greatest piece of sculpture seems to be a subtle thing we call the mind, which can appear and disappear in a matter of seconds and take on so many forms. As a student of sculpture, the first thing that strikes us is the mind is the first piece of sculpture I know of. And it seems to be a sculptor too. Is it the mind that has created the mountains? The mountain is not just a physical rock. It is a whole field of influence that embraces us way before we step on it or begin to look at it. What we see is what the mountain seems to be showing us. It is difficult to move a baby that does not want to be moved. Gravity does not seem to be just about size. Somehow, the child's intention seems to convert into gravity. The Himalayas too are not just granite and sedimentary rock. More than stone, the mountains seem to be a fertile womb, powerful in place. Yes, every sculpture has to have a womb. Every sculpture should be in a place. The Himalayas are as much the golden streak of sun on a smooth, snowy face of a mighty peak. The gurgling of the waters as they tumble amongst oval rocks whispers a tender breeze, the rumbling of pregnant clouds, and before all of this, silence seems to have created before the mind was born. Maybe then, beautiful as the mountains are, dazzling as the shapes are, ethereal as their presence is, the form and the gravitas of the Himalayas are, in fact, a veil. A veil is a covering, but the covering is the reason why you look in the direction what it covers. After all the lessons in beauty, power, and presence, maybe it's time to move into the void that the Himalayas are. Why such an expansive, elaborate lesson? Such is the lesson of sculpture, perhaps. What we need to know to walk back into the womb of space. The starting point of the river is not where the ice melts, but beyond the realm of the senses, beyond the field of thoughts. The massive mountains too seem to come from somewhere subtle, maybe the same place where the asana is supposed to take you. Block of stone, as I look at you, it is not you, but I who am in a tight embrace of all that's sacred, our single source, beloved space. Lots of love, Bharat Thakur.